The explosion hit just as the sun dipped beneath the Atlantic. Passengers were still gathering for dinner, silverware clinking, conversations echoing in the first-class dining saloon, when the sound tore through the ship like a cannon shot. Deep, hollow, bone-jarring. A jolt rippled through the decks, tables shifted, glasses toppled, and for one long, frozen moment, no one moved. Then came the tilt. Just a few degrees at first, but enough to send silverware sliding across white linen, enough to pull shrieks from passengers who clutched chairs, enough for the captain, standing on the bridge, to know exactly what had happened. RMS Hesperian had been torpedoed, and 4 months after the Lusitania disaster had stunned the world, another Cunard liner was fighting to survive in hostile waters. The Hesperian had departed Liverpool on the afternoon of September 4, 1915, with over 800 people on board, passengers and crew alike, bound for Quebec and Montreal. Though the First World War had been raging for over a year, this transatlantic route still operated, threading the needle between commerce and catastrophe. But few passengers boarded without fear. The sinking of the Lusitania in May had shattered the illusion that civilian ships were safe from attack. Nearly 1,200 people had died in that tragedy, including 128 Americans, prompting international outrage. Germany's unrestricted submarine warfare campaign had briefly eased in response to diplomatic pressure, but only officially. In practice, the seas remained a hunting ground. Hesperian was commanded by Captain William Main, an experienced mariner well aware of the risks. Aware, too, that his ship had drawn attention from the German Navy in the past. It had once served briefly as an armed merchant cruiser before being refitted for passenger duty again. Now she carried wounded Canadian soldiers returning home, a number of Red Cross nurses, and large quantities of mail. She also, crucially, flew the Red Cross flag, signaling a humanitarian mission. But in war, symbols are easily ignored. The German submarine U-20, infamous for having sunk the Lusitania, was still operating in the area under the command of Kapitän-Leutnant Walter Schwieger. Schwieger had been widely condemned after the Lusitania's destruction, but he remained in active service. And as fate would have it, U-20 was patrolling the same waters again in early September. It isn't clear whether Schwieger knew exactly which ship he was targeting. The Hesperian was not traveling under military escort. Like many liners during wartime, it was painted in subdued colors and kept a zigzag course to make torpedo strikes more difficult, but none of that mattered in the end. At approximately 8:30 p.m., just a few hours into the voyage and about 85 miles southwest of Fastnet Rock, a torpedo struck Hesperian near the starboard bow. The explosion ripped through the forward hull, tearing into the storage compartments and sending a geyser of water and steel into the air. Flames followed almost immediately. Passengers later reported hearing 2 distinct explosions, though it's unclear if the second was internal or simply the sound of secondary damage. Captain Main sprang into action. Unlike the Lusitania, which sank in just 18 minutes, the Hesperian remained afloat. The engines still ran. Lights stayed on. Communications gear was operational. And most critically, the crew had trained for this. Main's decision to drill extensively before departure likely saved hundreds of lives. Passengers were quickly gathered and guided to lifeboats. Officers and stewards moved methodically, urging calm. The crew had already rigged lights over the lifeboats in case of night evacuation, a decision made directly in response to the chaos aboard the Lusitania. But even with preparation, panic is never far from the surface. Several lifeboats were launched hastily. One, packed with too many frightened passengers, swung wildly during launch, slammed into the ship's hull, and dumped its occupants into the ocean. Some swam to safety, others did not. The night air filled with screams. One nurse, Anna McNeil, was killed in the explosion itself, struck by flying debris, or burned in the resulting fire. Her body was later found and identified, her name added to the growing list of medical personnel lost in the war, not on the battlefield, but on the sea. Rescue ships responded quickly. Wireless operators aboard Hesperian had sent distress calls within minutes of the strike, and vessels from Queenstown were already on high alert given the recent U-boat activity. Several steamers, including fishing vessels and patrol boats, converged on the site within hours. By midnight, over 750 survivors had been rescued from lifeboats or transferred from the damaged liner. But Captain Main remained aboard. Despite the damage, he believed the ship could be saved. The torpedo had hit forward, sparing the engine rooms and bulk of the hull. Pumps were running. The ship maintained some buoyancy. If a tow line could be attached, there was a chance. A tug was dispatched the next day. For more than 36 hours, the RMS Hesperian remained afloat, listing, battered, but stubbornly defiant. It seemed possible that she might limp back to port, another miracle rescue in a war littered with loss. But beneath the surface, the sea was winning. On September 6th, while under tow, a loud crack echoed through the ship. One of the bulkheads finally gave way. Water rushed in. The ship's nose dipped forward. Then slowly, almost silently, the Hesperian began to slip beneath the Atlantic. There was no explosion, no fireball, just the slow pull of gravity and pressure and failure. At 1 a.m., she disappeared from the surface. In the days that followed, survivors told their stories. Many had booked passage reluctantly, feeling there were no safe routes left. Others were refugees, families fleeing the devastation in Europe. Some were soldiers recovering from injuries. Others were medical staff returning home for rest. One Canadian woman, Mary Gibson, described being jolted from her cabin by the blast, grabbing her shawl, and running barefoot through the corridors to reach the deck. She recalled the eerie calm of the sea, the silhouette of lifeboats lowering into the dark, and the smell, that smell, of oil and scorched paint. A young boy, James Duffy, had been separated from his mother during the evacuation and was found hours later clinging to the wreckage of a broken lifeboat, shivering and silent. Their survival felt miraculous. But for at least 32 others, rescue came too late. Some died instantly in the blast, others succumbed to injuries. A few drowned in the panic or were crushed during evacuation. The British press seized on the story. The Daily Mail called it another violation of international law. The Times of London published survivors' accounts and emphasized the Red Cross flag, clearly visible on the ship's mast. The German High Command responded by claiming the ship had been a military transport in disguise, a claim echoed from the Lusitania's sinking. They suggested it had been carrying munitions or military personnel, despite no concrete evidence. Neutral observers, including Americans, were again forced to reckon with the uneasy truth. Civilian vessels were no longer safe. The line between war and peace had blurred, and beneath the waves, U-boats respected no boundaries. The sinking of the Hesperian didn't provoke the same firestorm as the Lusitania. It didn't shift nations into war, but it deepened the growing sense that nowhere was safe. By late 1915, the Atlantic Ocean had become a graveyard. The Cunard Line quietly mourned its second major loss in 4 months. The wreck of the Hesperian joined a growing list of commercial liners transformed into war dead. And though its sinking would fade from headlines over time, it never left the memory of those who survived it, or the families who did not. Captain William Main continued his career at sea, but the night of September 4th haunted him. In letters, he described the helplessness of watching flames bloom on the horizon, of hearing metal groan and bulkheads buckle. He had done everything right, and still, he lost his ship. Today, the Hesperian rests at the bottom of the Atlantic, approximately 130 miles from the Irish coast, in waters over 800 feet deep. No memorial stands above her, no grave markers, no stone. But for those who know her story, she represents something more than steel and rivets. She represents the moment when even the prepared, even the cautious, even the vessels with hospital flags and wounded men on board could no longer count on mercy. In the end, it didn't matter who they were, only where they were. On the sea, in a war, and in the path of something merciless. Thank you for listening to The Sunken Ledger. Subscribe for more true stories from the depths.